So, the RBA just hit us with 4.10%. It feels like another punch to the gut while you're already being pulled apart, doesn't it? Every news alert is another wave of chaos. Conflict in the Middle East, fuel prices climbing again. And all you can think about is your mortgage, your job security, the value of your superannuation. The headlines are designed to make you panic. They scream recession and crash. But what they're deliberately ignoring is a predictable pattern playing out underneath it all. This isn't about more noise or more opinions. This is about giving you a clear data-driven framework to finally see what's really going on. Because this chaos isn't random, it's a sequence. And understanding that sequence gives you back control. It's a cycle I call the disruption recovery pattern, and it's the map you need to navigate what's coming. So, what is the disruption recovery pattern? It's a 5-step framework I've refined over a decade of analyzing market cycles, and it's designed so you can see through the media noise and take control. Because the system isn't coming to save you. You have to have your own map. This is it. First, you recognize the economic tug-of-war happening right now between inflationary forces pushing prices up and deflationary forces trying to cool things down. Which of these two forces are you feeling most in your household budget right now? Let me know in the comments below. Second, you understand that the interest rate cycle is always temporary. History proves this again and again. Third, you analyze Australia's deep structural strengths, the bedrock realities the nightly news conveniently ignores. Fourth, you acknowledge the systemic safeguards. Our system is designed to bend, not to break. And fifth, the most crucial step, you learn to act during the period of peak fear. These 5 steps lead to one unavoidable conclusion. Lock this in. The greatest financial risk you face right now is not a market crash. The biggest risk is inaction. It's being paralyzed by short-term fear, because by the time things feel certain and the news sounds positive, the real opportunity is long gone. Now, we are going to walk through this pattern step by step, starting with that immediate battle, that tug-of-war. Because one of those two giant forces is starting to show serious signs of weakness. The question is, which one is it? And what does that mean for your money over the next 6 months? So, which one is it? Which side of this economic battle is starting to show serious signs of weakness? Before you can spot the loser, you need to know exactly who is on each team. Lock this in. The reason you're feeling so much confusion from the news is because our economy is caught in a powerful tug-of-war. Picture it. A thick rope with the flag in the middle representing the Australian economy, your job, your mortgage. On one side of that rope, pulling with all their might, is team inflation. This team is trying to light a fire under the economy. Their first player is global conflict, driving up the price of oil and everything that depends on it. Their second is continued government spending from past programs, still pumping cash into the system. And their third player is low unemployment. When people have secured jobs, they feel confident and they spend money, fueling demand. But on the other side, digging their heels in and pulling just as hard is team deflation, and their captain is the Reserve Bank. They are the firefighter, deliberately trying to put out that inflationary fire with the cold water of interest rate hikes. That 4.1% rate isn't an accident. It is their primary weapon to slow everything down. They're supported by slowing growth in other major economies and the general cloud of uncertainty that makes businesses and families like yours think twice about spending. Now hear me out. This isn't just my theory. The RBA's own documents, like their February 2026 monetary policy statement, essentially describe this exact battle. They talk about renewed inflationary pressures being actively offset by their own monetary tightening. They know it's a tug-of-war, and this is why the headlines are so useless. A headline has to pick a side to get a click. Crash imminent or economy booming. But the reality, the truth that impacts your life, is this messy, grinding tension in the middle. But, and this is the most critical part, this stalemate is not permanent. It feels like chaos, but one of these forces follows a predictable script it has used every single time in recent history. A series of rate hikes is not a permanent reality. It is a loaded spring. And understanding the historical pattern that dictates exactly when and how that spring gets released, that is the key to protecting your family and getting ahead. We need to look at that exact cycle, because it's the one thing that tells us what the RBA is almost certain to do next. So what is that exact cycle? Think of it like a song we've all heard before. The RBA plays it on repeat. The verse is always rate hikes. But the chorus that follows is always rate cuts. Every single time. High interest rates are a temporary tool, not a permanent state of being. Their only job is to put the brakes on inflation and slow the economy down. The RBA's goal is not to obliterate the economy and your finances. It's to cool things off. Once the job is done, or once they overdo it and the economy weakens too much, they flip the switch. Look at the evidence. The history is undeniable. After every single aggressive rate hiking cycle in modern Australian history, a rate cutting cycle has followed. The most recent and painful example proves the pattern is alive and well. We just endured 13 consecutive hikes between May 2022 and late 2023. That's the verse. The chorus of cuts is coming. Okay, stop. Lock this in. I know that was a bit of history, but what I just showed you is the predictable rhythm of the machine. Understanding that rhythm is critical because what comes next is Australia's secret weapon. If you miss how this works, you will miss why our RBA will be forced to cut rates faster and harder than most people expect. Do not tune out now. This is the part the media never connects. Here it is. Australia has a unique and powerful fiscal advantage. The IMF's own reporting confirms it. As a nation, we have recently delivered 2 national budget surpluses. We have reduced our net debt, and we hold a AAA credit rating from all the major agencies. The IMF calls these strong buffers against shocks. I call it firepower. Now, compare that to the United States or the UK, buried under mountains of public debt. Their central banks have their hands tied. Our government's strong financial position gives the RBA a freedom other countries dream of. It means when the time comes to stimulate the economy, they can cut rates aggressively without causing a fiscal crisis. This is the piece of the puzzle you won't hear on the nightly news. They love to show you the pain of the rate hike, the families struggling. It's great television, but they will not connect it to the unique strength of our national balance sheet and what that means for your mortgage in 12 to 18 months. It means the eventual pivot to lower rates here is not just probable, it is inevitable. And it will likely be faster and more decisive than anywhere else in the world. That loaded spring we talked about, our fiscal strength is the mechanism that ensures it will release with force. Now, I know what you might be thinking. That's great, Sarah, but what if the whole property market crashes before the RBA even gets a chance to pivot? It's a valid fear. But the Australian property market is protected by 3 distinct layers of armour that most people completely overlook. And understanding these 3 layers is the final key to moving forward with confidence. We need to break them down one by one. Alright, the first layer of this armour is the most fundamental. It's simple, brutal maths. We have a chronic nationwide housing shortage. It's not complicated. There are not enough homes for the people who need them. The Master Builders Association projects a shortfall of 166,000 homes by 2029. The Urban Development Institute puts that number closer to 400,000. Put that number on the screen. Look at it. That isn't a market fluctuation. That's a structural deficit. Right now, the number of properties listed for sale is already 20% below the long-term average. This creates an incredibly powerful floor under prices. You simply cannot have a catastrophic crash when the fundamental supply is so desperately low. It's the most basic economic law there is. Second layer, the systemic safety net. Lock this in. The government isn't coming to save you with a handout, but they will absolutely save the property market. Why? Because in Australia, the property market is the system. Our banks are massively exposed to it. Our national wealth is tied to it. We saw this play out perfectly in 2020. As the world shut down, what did the banks and government do? They didn't let the system fail. According to APRA data, they deferred repayments on over 485,000 home loans. That was an injection of $175.5 billion of support, 11% of all mortgages in the country, to prevent defaults and stop a crash in its tracks. They've shown their hand. They will never let it go to zero. Now, for the third layer of armor, and this is where we have to shut out the media noise. They scream at you that higher interest rates must equal a price crash. It's a simple story, but the real-world data from 2022 proves them dead wrong. Despite the fastest, most aggressive rate hikes in a generation, Australian property prices started rising again. Why? Because demand doesn't collapse. It shifts. It transitions. The family that gets priced out of a $1.5 million home doesn't just disappear. They go and support the $1.3 million market. The person who can't afford the city moves to the regions. This constant churn of adjustment prevents a total price collapse across the board. The structural forces are simply stronger than the rate shock. So your family home, your biggest asset, it's not going to vanish in a puff of smoke. The crash everyone is screaming about is systemically unlikely. You can breathe on that front. And you need to hear me on this. The very same forces that make property safe from a crash, they are the exact same forces that are creating a far more insidious personal threat to your family's long-term financial future. It's a slow burn trap that is designed to lock your family out of progress for a generation. The real danger isn't a crash, it's what happens next. Because if prices don't crash, what do you think happens to the cost of everything when the RBA finally does what we know it will do? And starts cutting interest rates again? What happens is the final click of a trap being sprung. A trap that's far more dangerous for your family's future than any short-term market dip. It's called the affordability trap. Here is how it works. The very same force that prevents a property crash, that chronic structural housing shortage, is the engine that will drive this trap. Right now, credible research from groups like AMP quantifies Australia's housing shortfall at over 200,000 homes. And it's getting worse. Outlook reports project that crisis will be 200% more severe by 2030, as we consistently fail to build enough homes for our population. This means when interest rates do eventually fall, the market isn't going to get cheaper, it's going to get supercharged. And prices will accelerate far beyond wage growth for years to come. So when you hear someone say they're waiting for the certainty, what they're really doing is waiting for a future where it is mathematically much harder to afford to get into the market or to ever upgrade. Let's reframe the real risk here. Lock this in. The risk of acting now might be that you overpay by 5% in the short term. The risk of not acting, of waiting, is being priced out by 50% in the long term. Permanently. Inaction isn't a safe choice. It is an active decision to risk your family being left behind. And this isn't just about you. Think about your kids in 10 years. If you wait, you're not just missing a cycle. You are accepting a future where the ladder of opportunity is pulled up so high, it might be impossible for them to even get a foot on the first rung. This trap is the real pattern everyone else is missing while they're obsessed with the daily news cycle. And you need to hear me on this. The system is not coming to save you from it. This is a structural reality that you must strategically navigate yourself. But understanding this trap, seeing it clearly for what it is the most critical first step. It moves you from a position of fear to a position of strategy, because this isn't about panic, it's about preparation. Now that we've exposed the trap, the final piece of the puzzle is understanding the strategic moves you can make to not only avoid it, but to use this disruption to your advantage. So, what is the strategic move you need to make? It's simpler and far more powerful than a secret stock tip or a hidden property hotspot. The single most important strategic move is the decision itself, the decision to act based on a predictable pattern instead of waiting for a feeling of certainty that always arrives too late. Let's run through the pattern one last time. This is your new mental checklist. First, you saw the chaotic tug-of-war between inflation and recession for what it is, background noise, not the signal. Second, you understood the inevitable pivot. The fact our system is hardwired to eventually return to lower interest rates. Third, you gained confidence in the property fortress, seeing the 3 layers of armor that protect Australian property from a true collapse. And finally, you stared directly into the affordability trap and understood that waiting is now the biggest risk of all. This isn't a theory. We have the receipt. Just look back at 2020. Amidst complete global uncertainty, those who acted were massively rewarded. According to ABS and CoreLogic data, in the year to early 2022, Australian property prices surged by over 22%. For the typical homeowner, that was a paper gain of 135 and 236. That is the tangible real-world cost of waiting for a certainty. So lock this in. By the time things feel certain, the opportunity is usually already gone. Doing nothing is not a passive choice. It is an active decision to go backwards and let inflation eat away at your family's future. The headlines will keep trying to scare you. The noise will only get louder. But you now have the pattern. You have the data. This whole journey was about giving you the toolkit to finally ignore that noise and take back control. The only variable left is you. It's time to move from being a spectator in your own financial life to a strategist for your family's future. If this is the kind of clarity you've been searching for, then subscribe to this channel, because the system isn't coming to save you, but having the right map changes everything.